Christmas was always the same in our family. Derek at the center of attention, Mom buzzing around him like a desperate bee trying to keep her last flower alive, and me in the corner with a glass of cheap white wine and even cheaper patience. That year, the roast was dry, the kids were glued to their phones, and the house smelled like a mix of resentment and cinnamon. Lynn brought her usual stale sugar cookies, and Mom insisted we all wear those scratchy matching sweaters she picked up from the clearance bin at Kohl's. I played along like I always do, because it's easier than starting a war over nothing. And then Derek, with a mouth full of honey-glazed ham and ego, looked straight at me, not even a side glance, but dead-on eye contact, and said, "We don't need failures at the table." Just like that. A grin stretched across his smug face, like he thought he'd cracked the funniest damn joke of the night. The table chuckled, half nervous, half genuine. Mom winced but said nothing. Lynn pretended not to hear, but I saw her lips twitch. The twins didn't even look up from their iPads. I nodded. Just once. Calm, steady. No need to make a scene. I'd made too many of those in my 20s, and they all remembered. That nod was my last act of agreement in this goddamn family. It's wild how silence feels louder than a scream when your blood is boiling and no one in the room notices. Not a single soul flinched. Not one of them, not even my mother, stepped in to say, "Hey, that's not okay." Because in our family, Derek could say or do anything, and we'd all have to pretend it was clever or cute, or just Derek being Derek. I took another sip of wine, let the taste of bitterness and cheap oak sting the back of my throat, and smiled like a woman who'd just remembered something important. That night, while they opened the gifts I bought, while Derek's youngest tore into the PlayStation controller I'd paid for, while Lynn kissed my cheek and whispered, "Thank you for everything," again, like a broken record, I logged into my laptop, opened my password manager, and typed in the words I hadn't touched since Dad died: Family Fund, Derek. See, what nobody in that room seemed to remember, or maybe they did, and they just hoped I'd never say it aloud, is that I've been the reason Derek's life didn't fall apart about 23 times in the last 2 decades. It started small. After Dad passed, I was 24, Derek was barely 19, and Mom was lost in some quiet grief that made her completely useless. Derek dropped out of community college within 2 months and started working part-time at a tire shop while dating Lynn, who was already pregnant by then. He cried on my couch, said he couldn't afford diapers, so I drove to Target and maxed out my JCPenney card instead. That's how it always went. Derek would cry, Derek would panic, Derek would mess up, and I'd show up. Not because I wanted to be the hero. Hell no. I did it because no one else would. Because Mom refused to choose and always said, "You've got the good job, honey. You can help him out for a while." A while turned into a decade. I co-signed his first mortgage at 27. I paid off his damn truck loan when he lost his job and blamed it on the recession, though somehow he still managed to afford a Vegas trip the same summer. I covered braces for his twins, school supplies every fall, and Christmas gifts every year, even when I was unemployed for a few months and had to borrow against my 401k to do it. Funny thing about being generous, if you do it long enough, people stop calling it kindness. They start calling it your job. No one in the family ever said thank you. Not sincerely, anyway. The kind of thank you that sticks in your chest and warms you for days? Never heard it. Lynn always had that edge in her voice, like she was embarrassed to need me. Derek acted like it was his birthright. And Mom, well, Mom once told me some kids just need more love than others, which somehow always meant I had to be the one giving it. But you want to know what really broke me that night? It wasn't the insult. It wasn't the laughter. It was the fact that when Derek said it, "We don't need failures at the table," he meant it. He believed it. After everything. After every dollar, every sacrifice, every time I swallowed my own pride to make sure his kids never felt poor. I was still the failure to him. Because I was single. Because I didn't have kids. Because I didn't have a husband sitting next to me carving the ham. That was the moment it clicked. I wasn't part of the family. I was a resource. So I nodded. I smiled. I helped clean up the wrapping paper like a good aunt. And while they all dozed off watching a Hallmark movie in their fleece pajamas, warm and fed and oblivious, I logged into every account I had access to. Banking, credit cards, utility portals, Venmo history, that old joint mortgage I'd forgotten to remove my name from. And right there, sandwiched between my Fidelity investment account and my student loan payoff tracker, sat the account titled Family Fund, Derek. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I just felt free. Like something was finally about to change. Like I was about to stop being the wallet and start being something I hadn't been in a long, long time. Selfish. And maybe, just maybe, that wasn't such a bad thing. You don't really notice how much you're doing for someone until you stop doing it, until the silence of a canceled transaction echoes louder than a screaming overdraft notice. And for the first time in 20 years, I didn't flinch. I didn't make excuses, didn't tell myself, just one more month, or they're really struggling right now, and I sure as hell didn't send a Venmo to Lynn labeled for groceries, with a winky face and a little Santa emoji like I'd done every December for the last 10 years. No, this time I just let the zeros sit. Let the bills go unpaid. Let the cushion I'd built for them deflate like a slow leak in a tire you never fix because you're sure it'll last just a little longer. The truth is, for all their smiles, and we're so grateful, Derek and Lynn never once asked what it took to keep them from drowning. They never saw the late nights I spent staring at spreadsheets trying to balance their emergencies with my own needs. They never saw me eat boxed mac and cheese for a week because Derek forgot to pay me back for his electric bill, or skip a vacation because I'd covered a dental procedure for one of the kids. They only saw that the money appeared. Quietly. Reliably. Like magic. And I was the magician, the background character with a debit card and no boundaries. I had folders, physical ones and digital ones labeled Derek House, Lynn Medical, Twins Tuition, and a spreadsheet that tracked every dollar since the very first emergency fund transfer I made in 2004. There were hundreds of entries, some with notes like urgent, or he swore this was the last time, and others with no explanation at all, because by then I'd stopped asking questions. Just send the money. Just fix the problem. Just be the sister who holds it all together while everyone else gets to fall apart. I looked over the numbers again that night, the glow of the screen painting my living room in cold blue light while Bing Crosby crooned from the TV like everything was merry and bright. I wasn't even angry anymore. Just curious. Curious how long it would take them to notice that the safety net was gone. That I was done playing the bank. Over the last 7 years, I sent them over $26,000. Or maybe it was 16. I'm bad at math. I could practically hear the accounting majors in the comments frothing at the mouth right about now, screaming into the void about my decimal placement or missing digits. Go ahead. Leave your corrections. I hope you do. Because maybe then, for once, someone will pay attention to the damn numbers. The first payment I canceled was the electric bill. I had access to the portal because Derek never changed the login from when I set it up years ago, when he called me from his driveway in tears because the power company was threatening to shut them off and the twins had homework due online. I'd covered it without hesitation. After that, it just became my responsibility. The bill would come in, I'd pay it. Every month. Without a single thank you. So I logged in and deleted my payment method, sat back, and imagined the flicker of their porch light when the balance came due. Next was Lynn's car insurance, which I'd been paying since she got laid off during the pandemic and never quite recovered. I never told anyone about that one, not even my therapist, back when I was trying to make sense of the invisible weight crushing my chest. I just did it because she needed it and I had the means. That's what they all told me over and over again. You have the means. You don't have kids. You're doing well. As if being responsible meant I owed everyone a piece of myself. I canceled the automatic transfer for the twins' school tuition last. That one took a deep breath and a glass of whiskey. They went to a private program for kids with learning differences, and I always believed in giving them the best shot. But I wasn't their parent. I wasn't even the cool aunt. I was the ATM with a sad little Christmas card and a Target gift receipt taped to the back. So I let it go. Shut it down. They'd get a notice in 2 weeks when the payment failed, and Derek would lose his mind. But that was his mess to manage now, not mine. The guilt came in waves at first, like a tide that's been trying to pull me under for years, but never quite had the strength. I sat with it, listened to the stories in my head that told me I was cruel, ungrateful, unloving. And then, like smoke clearing after a house fire, the guilt gave way to something sharper. Relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for a shoe to drop. I wasn't checking my bank balance with dread or bracing for another late-night text that said, "Hey sis, can I borrow just a little until Friday?" I wasn't responsible. I was free. And you know what? I didn't turn off the lights. Not literally. I left everything on the way it was. Smiled at the Christmas tree I'd decorated alone, let the warmth of my apartment settle around me, and sipped that whiskey like it was communion. I left the lights on, but I flipped the switch behind the scenes. It would take them 2 weeks to notice the darkness. And right on schedule, 2 weeks to the day, I got the text. Group message. Derek never could keep things private when drama gave him an audience. It said, "Hey sis, your card got declined for the twins' school. Did something happen with your bank?" I didn't answer. I just stared at the screen, then tapped the message, hit leave conversation, and poured myself another drink. I thought that maybe he'd last a month before realizing something had shifted, that perhaps Derek's instinct to coast through life on charm and delusion would delay his reaction, but apparently, losing free money hits a man's pride faster than losing sleep ever did. The first text came 3 days after the tuition declined, a harmless little nudge wrapped in Derek's usual passive-aggressive snark, "Hey sis, think your card got messed up? You might want to check that." No mention of gratitude, no check-in on my health, no curiosity about why a decade-long lifeline suddenly went dead. Just the assumption that I had somehow failed in my duties, like the software glitched or my bank hiccuped, as if it were a system error and not a conscious decision. I ignored the message, deleted it without responding, and stared at my dark phone like it was a stranger in my hands. The next one was less polite, dropped 24 hours later with a little more heat. "If there's a problem, you could just say it." Kinda shitty to let the school call me before giving me a heads up. It made me laugh out loud, just once, that bitter single chest punch kind of laugh that only comes when someone accuses you of the thing they've been doing to you for years. The calls started on the 5th day. I didn't pick up. I let the screen light up with his name again and again, watched the same contact photo appear, that stupid grin from a barbecue 2 summers ago, holding a beer with one arm draped around me like we were the perfect family. I let it ring. I wasn't ready for the sound of his voice, not yet, not when the space I'd carved for myself still felt fragile and new. Then Mom called. Of course she did. And when I picked up, out of habit, not obligation, the first thing out of her mouth wasn't, "How are you?" or "Is something going on?" or even "I've missed you." It was, "Why are you being petty at Christmas?" Her voice carried that tight-lipped guilt trip she'd perfected sometime in the late 90s, that particular tone that suggested every problem in our family could be solved if I just went back to making myself smaller. I let the question hang there like smoke from a fire I didn't start, and finally said, "I'm just resting." For once, there was silence on the other end, the kind of silence that says everything you need to know. Mom didn't understand the word rest when it came from me. She only understood it when it was about Derek, when he needed a break from responsibility, when Lynn needed time to figure things out, when the kids were going through a lot. But me? I was always the stable one. The helper. The extra adult in the family who got the leftovers and was expected to smile through it. Lynn didn't text me directly, but she posted a picture on Facebook 2 days later. The twins sitting on their porch with blankets wrapped around them, looking sullen, captioned, "Tough season but grateful for what we have." No tags, no direct call-out, but I wasn't stupid. She knew I'd see it. She wanted me to. That's how she worked quiet guilt bombs that explode slowly in your conscience. I didn't comment. I didn't like it. I just scrolled past and closed the app. Instead, I made an appointment with a therapist, my first in nearly 7 years, and sat on a too-clean couch while a stranger with soft eyes and a notepad asked me questions like, "When did you start to feel invisible?" and "Have you ever said no before?" And that was the moment I realized how long it had been since someone cared more about my answers than my availability. I told her the truth, or most of it anyway. I said I wasn't angry. I was tired. I was so goddamn tired of being the strong one, the smart one, the one who never needed help, the one they assumed would always come through. She didn't try to fix me. She just nodded and said, "That sounds really lonely," and I felt something crack. Meanwhile, the fallout hit Derek like a slow-moving avalanche, steady, suffocating, and entirely his own doing. His credit dropped like a stone. I knew because he texted a screenshot of his score with the message, "Did you close something? This doesn't make sense." I didn't reply. I didn't remind him that I'd co-signed on 2 cards he maxed out and forgot to pay off. That I was the only reason a mortgage ever got approved in the first place. I figured he could connect the dots if he wasn't too busy blaming me for the mess. His car was next. Repossessed from their driveway in broad daylight while Lynn filmed from the window and posted it to her private Instagram with a crying face sticker and the words, "Prayers needed." Again, no names mentioned, but everyone in our small circle knew who the silent villain was supposed to be. Carolyn, the cold-hearted sister. Carolyn, the spinster with no kids and no compassion. Carolyn, who finally stopped playing along. But the part that really gutted me, the part that made my hands shake even though I knew it was coming, was the notice from the county about overdue property taxes on Derek's home. I had been paying those quietly for the last 4 years, ever since he lost his job and swore he'd catch up as soon as things stabilized. He never did. He never even asked if I could help, he just assumed I would, and when I did, he treated it like a favor from the universe, not from me. Now the county was knocking. Literally. The letter said they were considering a lien if the balance wasn't resolved within 60 days. It was addressed to Derek, but I got the email because my name was still buried deep in the tax records from that cursed cosign. And then, as if on cue, an email from Mom. Short, clipped, no greeting. Just one sentence. "Derek told me you're doing this out of jealousy. Is that true?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Not angry. Not even hurt. Just amazed at how far they'd twist things before asking why I finally stopped carrying the weight. And I hadn't even started swinging yet. It had been almost 3 full years since Derek last set foot on my porch, and even then, it was only to borrow my luggage for some trip he couldn't afford and never invited me to, so when I opened the door and saw him standing there, holding nothing but his own humiliation and a crooked smile, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and nausea swell in my throat. He looked older than I remembered, not in the way years gently wear a person down, but in the way consequences press into a man's skin when the world stops cushioning his fall. He didn't knock again after I paused, just stood there in that beat-up hoodie, waiting for the older sister who'd always rescued him to let him in without question, like I always had. I stepped aside without a word, motioning him through like he was a stranger who might just be there to fix something rather than break it again, and I watched how he scanned my living room like he expected it to be colder, emptier, like he still assumed my life was some pale shadow of his chaos. He sat down on the edge of my couch like someone visiting a hospital patient, arms crossed, trying to look casual, and after a long pause where neither of us spoke, he finally exhaled like he was the one carrying all the tension. "Look," he started, voice too soft to be sincere, "we're family. Just until I get back on my feet." I didn't even blink. I walked to the kitchen, poured a mug of the burnt coffee I'd brewed earlier out of habit, and handed it to him without cream or sugar. He looked down at the cup like it was a challenge, maybe even an insult, but I didn't care. When I finally spoke, my voice was flat, smooth as glass, and sharper than anything he was ready for. What feat, Derek? You've been floating on mine since you were 19. I watched it hit him, the truth slapping him across the face without ever raising my hand. He didn't deny it, not really. Just furrowed his brow and rubbed the back of his neck like that motion could summon accountability. He sipped the coffee and winced, like it was poison, then leaned forward with the same expression he used to get away with everything from speeding tickets to bad grades. You can't just abandon us, he said, and there it was, not a request, not an apology, not even a question. A demand, served like a birthright, as if I was the traitor for finally refusing to drown beside them. I said nothing. I just stood, walked to the front door, and held it open. My silence said more than any insult ever could. He stared at me for a few seconds longer, probably waiting for me to cave like I always did, to wrap it all up in forgiveness and let him pretend this visit was a reconciliation instead of a withdrawal attempt. But I didn't. I watched him walk out with his pride clutched under his arm like it still mattered, and when I closed the door behind him, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just locked it. 2 days later, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten on the kind of floral stationery Lynn always bought in bulk from Hobby Lobby when things were good. The envelope had no return address, but the slanted cursive gave her away before I even opened it. I read it slowly, each word aching with performative sorrow. The kids don't understand. They think Aunt Carolyn hates them. I try to explain, but they're just children. We're just trying to hold things together. There was no apology. No acknowledgement of the years I'd carried them, the choices I made that cost me vacations, security, relationships. Just guilt, weaponized with ink and soft paper, as if seeing their names written out would melt the resolve I'd finally found. I read it twice, not out of doubt, but to remind myself how long I had been cast in the role of villain. I folded the letter once, twice, then struck a match, and let the flames eat it over my kitchen sink until only black flakes and the faint smell of soot remained. They made me a villain long before I ever acted like one. They whispered it to each other in quiet corners, made jokes about my coldness, my need for control, my lack of a family, like those things weren't products of the very sacrifices they demanded. And now that I finally wore the costume they'd stitched for me, now that I stopped pretending to be the forgiving older sister with limitless patience, they were shocked that I played the part so well. But the universe, in its infinite sense of humor, wasn't done reminding me that blood ties are rarely untangled with a single cut. Because that same evening, tucked between an internet bill and a catalog I never subscribed to, was a letter from the bank, real official, sealed tight, with my full name printed on it like a slap across the face. I opened it with the dread I'd trained myself to ignore, and there it was, black and white and cruel. I was still the secondary signer on the house. Derek hadn't removed me. Of course he hadn't, because why would he? As long as my name was there, as long as I could be dragged back into the mess with a signature or a debt collector, he didn't have to be fully responsible. If he defaulted, and we both knew he would, it would land on me like a quiet bomb, already ticking. I stared at that letter for a long time, longer than I should have, and somewhere between the lines of legal language and account numbers, a fire started to build. Not anger this time, not guilt, but something else entirely. Resolve. The kind you don't come back from. Because now I didn't just have to protect myself. Now I had to clean up the last thing that still tied me to his destruction. And this time, I wouldn't ask for permission. There's a kind of stillness that happens after a storm ends, not the dramatic silence that feels ominous, but the soft, echoing kind, the absence of noise that reminds you how loud the world used to be when you were living for everyone else. That was the quiet I felt driving to the bank that morning, the air sharp with winter, the city gray and bleached under a sky that looked like it hadn't decided whether it was going to snow or just sulk. I parked in the same spot I always did when I had errands to run, the same familiar parking lot next to the credit union where I'd been depositing paychecks and solving Derek's messes since I was barely out of college. I didn't go inside with a plan to be the hero or even the martyr. I didn't dress up, didn't rehearse a speech in the mirror, didn't tell myself that doing this made me noble. I just walked in with my purse and a decision that had taken 20 years to build. I waited in line behind a woman arguing about overdraft fees and a teenager trying to cash a crumpled paycheck, and when it was my turn, I slid the statement across the counter and said the words with a calmness that surprised even me. I'd like to pay off this mortgage in full. The woman behind the desk blinked, then smiled that plastic banker smile, the kind that comes out for big fish and steady clients. She started typing, asked a few routine questions, and when she reached the screen that confirmed my secondary signer status, she paused like she was waiting for a story. But I didn't give her one. I just nodded, handed her my account info, and watched as she transferred the funds. Quietly. Completely. No drama, no tears, no confetti celebration for the woman who'd just erased her brother's last excuse. It was done in under 30 minutes. I walked out with a receipt, a stack of legal confirmations, and a weight lifted so quietly I almost didn't notice it had been sitting on my chest. And as I stood outside the bank, keys in hand, cold wind curling under my coat, I realized I'd done the one thing they'd never expect me to do. I let them go, not with rage, not with revenge, but with something far worse for people like Derek. Indifference. But the truth is, I didn't do it because I loved him. Not anymore. Maybe not ever, if I'm being honest. I did it because I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years, something that crawled back into my mind like a song stuck on repeat, my father's voice, brittle and slow, rasping from a hospital bed that smelled like lemon disinfectant and unspoken fears. He looked at me, not Mom, not Derek, just me, and said, "Take care of your brother, Carolyn. He's not built like you." I'd nodded, because I was 21 and terrified and wanted to be seen as strong. I'd said yes, because it felt like a badge of honor, like he was passing me some torch of importance. I didn't understand then that what he really gave me was a sentence, not a request, but a lifelong obligation wrapped in sentiment. And I kept that promise. I kept it through job losses and debt, through holidays I couldn't afford, through birthdays I forgot to buy myself gifts for because I was too busy paying for someone else's. But that promise ended on Christmas. Not because I stopped caring, but because I finally saw the truth. Derek didn't want to stand on his own feet. He just wanted someone else to carry him. And I was done being the mule. So yes, I paid it off. Not out of guilt, not for closure, but because I wanted my name off that house so badly I could taste the freedom in my mouth. I wanted the paper trail to stop. I wanted the collectors, the warnings, the risk tied to his recklessness to disappear. And most of all, I wanted the one thing I'd never had from my family: silence. So I gave myself the last gift I could afford. I moved, packed my things with no announcement, sold my condo, broke my lease early, and picked a city 3 states away where nobody knew my name and nobody owed me anything. I didn't leave a forwarding address. I didn't send a group text or post a farewell selfie. I just left, like smoke from a fire that burned out on its own. A week later, the voicemails started. First from Derek. His voice, once full of swagger, now thin and strained, like a man rehearsing humility in front of a cracked mirror. "You always thought you were better than us," he said, and there was no bitterness in it anymore, just confusion. "But without your money, we're still family." The audio crackled, then cut off. No apology. No acknowledgement of what I'd done. Just that desperate, final grasp for identity. I didn't return the call. I didn't need to, because the answer was already in my bones. I stared out the window of my new apartment that night, city lights blinking in the distance like quiet promises, and whispered to myself what I'd never had the courage to say aloud. "No, Derek. Without my money, you're strangers." New Year's Eve came quiet and cold. the kind of night that feels stitched together from memory and regret. I didn't go out. I didn't count down. I sat on the floor with a blanket and a glass of wine, the room dark except for the soft glow of the television playing someone else's party. 2 missed calls blinked on my phone, one from Lynn, one from Mom. I didn't answer. Not because I was angry, not even because I was indifferent, but because I knew, with perfect clarity, that answering would pull me back into a version of myself I'd buried. And I wasn't digging her up again. I looked around my quiet space. No decorations, no laughter, no chaos, just air, just breath, just space. And for the first time in my life, that emptiness felt like peace. I don't know if I'm a monster, or if I just stopped being a doormat, but this year, I gave myself the only gift I've never had: silence.